but it also puts them 13.2 under the first apron. So again, you can't do anything with the first apron, right? You can't go above the first apron.
Right, you're stuck there no matter what you do,
which is 178.1 million. But what the Kings just did is by trading Jaylen McDaniels $4.7 million, they dropped 5.9 million under the cap, under the luxury tax, and 13.2 million, around 13.2 under the actual NBA first apron. So now what they can do, if they so choose, is they've got options. They can sign a free agent, which there aren't a lot of free agents that are out there, and they still have their mid-level exceptions. So they can sign a free agent for up to 13 million and go all the way up to the hard cap. Got me?
Yes.
They can also trade for a player that makes 13 point whatever million and below. The mid-level exception is right at just about 13 million. So they can absorb a contract that is 13 million or less and 4 years or less, as long as it fits into the parameters of the mid-level exception. So they could do that. But now if they do that, they would be a tax team. They also, because now they're underneath the tax, they have like 5.9 million. So they could do a deal where they trade, let's say, a $17 million player and a $2 million player. So that puts you at 19 for a $24 million player. And you have that 5 million that you're taking back. That's more. You can do that deal and still be under the luxury tax. So like there's a lot of things they can do.
So how much room do they have now? How much, if they maxed out, if they got a player that's the maximum amount they can get, what's that number?
Well, it's complicated. It depends on if you're trading a player with that or if you're just absorbing a player into the mid-level.
If you're just absorbing a player into the mid-level.
The most it is right around $13 million. They can take on a full mid-level exception at this point.
Okay.
Player.
Got it.
And go all the way up to the cap.
And that is where they're hard capped at the first apron.
At the first apron.
If they don't want to be a tax team.
Yep.
How much room do they have?
They got a little less than 6 million.
Got it.
So they've got 5.9, 5.8 million, right around there.
Got it.
So they can play in that area. They can go out and try to sign, like we talked about. I talked about this with D'Lo and KC. So let's say they go out and say, we're going to sign Jay Crowder. He seemed to be the name that everyone was buzzing about.
That's literally the name I was about to throw out.
Okay. Perfect. So let's say you go out and you sign Jay Crowder.
Okay.
The Kings have the biannual exception, so they could actually pay him up to like 4-point-something million, which would fit into that. But let's say they want to give him the league minimum, which that's probably what Jay Crowder's signing for at this point. The league minimum for him is going to be around 3.3 or 3.4 million. But because he's a veteran, the league only counts 2.1 million against the cap.
Right. They treat him like a second year.
They treat him like a second-year player.
Right.
Exactly. So Alex Len right now makes 3.3 million, but the Kings only pay 2.1 million for him.
Against the cap.
Against the cap. Right. They still pay the other money. Right. So basically, you could go out and sign 2 of those players because you would still stay under the luxury tax.
Mm-hmm.
Or, again, you can go out and sign a much higher paid player. You trade for a much higher paid player and take back more salary because you now have room. Are you with me? So there's a lot of ways in which they can use this cap space.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's really interesting that they did this today. Like, because in the grand scheme of things, finding a team that would take on a player like Jaylen McDaniels and for a second-round pick, and the Kings gave cash.
I also misspoke earlier. They did get a top 55 protected second-round pick.
Yes.
Thank you to the people in the chat who corrected me.
They did. That. They got a top 55 protected pick. So
we'll be watching the Spurs closely this year to see where they land in the second round.
Yeah, so if they have a pick that's number 56, 57, 58, 59, or 60, it goes to the Kings. If not,
fingers crossed,
the Kings don't get anything for the deal. But that's one of those things where I think you have to, in the mechanisms of the NBA, you have to actually give something. And sometimes what you would do is you would give the rights to like a guy who's in Europe who's never going to play.
Sure.
Right. So that you have to give something up in a trade. So look, the big question, Kyle, is number one, was Jaylen McDaniels just not part of the plan? Which clearly he becomes not part of the plan.
Right.
I mean, you did give up things to get him.
Right. And that's where so that's where the initial reaction to this, at least my initial reaction was, So the Kings have now traded Davon Mitchell, Sasha Vezenkov, 2 second-round picks
Mm-hmm.
to get a top 55 protected second-round pick.
And like 5.8 million in, or 5.
I'm sorry, they also traded Jaylen McDaniels.
Yeah. So basically in the combination of the deals, they saved, what was Sasha Vezenkov, like 6.5 million.
So a
and
little over 6.
And then he got bought out, right?
Right.
So, well, he didn't even get bought out. He just like
He
decided
bounced.
he
Took $0 and left.
Yeah, exactly, which is crazy. I don't know if that would have happened in Sacramento or not.
Sure.
But then also Davon Mitchell, I think, was on the books for 5.2 million or something. So you saved roughly 12 million bucks in salary cap space in all this maneuvering. But what are you going to do with that cap space? I mean, part of that went to DeMar DeRozan. So we just have to look at it as that was a function of what happened during this offseason. But I think the timing of this trade is strange. And I'd also, the need to go out and trade McDaniels now is kind of strange, because you have a week here where rosters don't have to be set until next Thursday when you start the regular season, right? So up until that point, you're allowed to carry up to 21 players. So I know people are like, oh, they're trying to clear a roster spot. Well, as of right now, they could have just waived Broderick Thomas or Terry Taylor or Scala Bissiere and cleared up 3 roster spots if they had some big trade, right? They also have other players that they could just waive and go away from. So the roster spot issue isn't a thing right now. Next Thursday, if they would have kept everybody, including Orlando Robinson, who's hurt and who's on a $500,000 guarantee, and Boogie Ellis, who's an Exhibit 10, they would have 15 roster spots taken, plus your 3 two-ways. Now that you don't have Jaylen, now you're down to 14. But again, Boogie Ellis is on a non-guaranteed Exhibit 10 contract. You could easily just waive him and not have to pay him. I mean, it's barely anything you're paying him, right?
Right. So
why did the Kings do this today, especially when you had to give up an asset to do this trade?
Right.
That's the puzzling thing, because realistically, Jaylen McDaniels' $4.7 million contract fits into a lot of trades. So if you were going to get, a month from now or in February, right before the deadline, and you had, again, $8 million for Trey Lyles or $17 million for Kevin Huerter, if you were to take those contracts, add in Jaylen McDaniels' contract, now you have a larger contract that you can, a larger amount of money that you're playing with, right? So like it's kind of strange, but at the same time, it does lend itself to make you wonder if they have something else up their sleeve, and if that something else, the other team may not want Jaylen McDaniels' contract.
Sure. Is there any chance, or I concerned that this was just like a cost saving move?
Well, of course. I mean, you can always think that. I mean, I know, like, we deal with Rory in the chat all the time, who likes to fight this battle that the Vivek is like the cheapest owner there ever was, which I don't like prescribe to. Like, I mean, there's not been a way in which I think the Kings could have taken on a bunch more salary.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn here in the next couple of years for sure. But there's no evidence for me to say definitively one way or the other.
Exactly. So, I think you could say it's a cost cutting move, but you have to understand the Kings sent out money in this deal, and they probably they're able to give up a maximum during once of $3 million. So they probably gave the Spurs $2 or $3 million to do this deal. And the Spurs turn around and they're waiving Jaylen McDaniels.
Right.
Yeah, McDaniels is going to be a free agent like this week. And so people know the Kings cannot go back and they can't sign Jaylen McDaniels. I think it's 6 months. There's a window. They can't sign him. Once you trade a player and he's waived, you're not allowed to sign him and bring him back. It's a Zydrunas Ilgauskas rule, basically. Yeah. Because the Cavs did this and then signed him right back after he was waived somewhere else to less money, but saved money. The other question I've got yesterday, which I'll make sure that we clear up.
Please.
People are like, why would the Kings not just waive Jaylen McDaniels themselves? Why did they give up some cash and a second round pick? And the answer is because if you waive a player, his salary still counts towards your cap. And so by trading him to another team, the salary now counts for the Spurs cap, They're waiving him. They're
They'll eat the
absorbing.
4 point
They'll
whatever million.
exactly on their salary cap space. So basically, you paid a second round pick to clear Jaylen McDaniels $4.7 million off your books.
So that means the Kings were the ones that facilitated this. This wasn't because I initially thought, oh, maybe the Spurs just really like Jaylen McDaniels or whatever.
Yeah.
But if they're waiving him immediately, that means the Kings were just calling teams with cap space and going, hey, will you take this? Which is why you think that there's got to be another move in the chamber.
Well,
they wouldn't just do this randomly.
Okay, so there's two things there. They could, they are the ones who like reached out clearly, like in this deal. But what you do if you're a team like the Kings, and you're looking at your salary and you want to make some adjustments, you look around the league. Who has cap space? What is it going to cost me to trade this player? The Kings and Spurs just did a deal, so they already have this relationship that they're working on. Because remember, Harrison Barnes was traded there during the offseason as part of the 3-team deal with the Bulls and to get DeMar DeRozan in Sacramento.
Right.
So you already have some working relationship. You may have even had a conversation about this. And the Kings had to wait 60 days to do anything with Jaylen. They could have traded him, but only as a separate player by himself, which is what they ended up doing. So Kyle, like, you're right. There could be a reason why they did it today, that they have another deal lined up, and this thing is just going to play out like very quickly. But there's also a possibility that they looked at the Spurs. They looked at Jaylen McDaniels. They said, Jaylen McDaniels is not going to play for us. We would prefer to go with the young guys. And the Spurs have money today, but they might not have money a month from now. They might have money 2 months from now.
Right.
That well might dry up because some other team could look at the Spurs and say, hey, look, Minnesota is still over like the first apron, and they want to get lower. Like, whoever it might be might want to drop their salary. So the Kings jumped on it now because it's like, okay, let's take care of it now. And not only that, let's give Jaylen McDaniels a week to go find a new team before the season starts.
Sure.
As opposed to just leaving him high and dry like the day, the last day before the season starts.
So that means there doesn't necessarily have to be something coming down. Like,
there doesn't necessarily have
to. Because I'm on
to.
pins and needles for whatever's coming next.
Yeah, and I think that's what fans should be looking at, because there's usually a reason why you do something like this. And again, if you were going to trade Jaylen McDaniels, there is potential for you to trade him along with other players down the road without having to give up that second round pick. Or maybe you do still have to give up second round pick, or you've got to give up, you go trade for some bigger player and you have to give up a first or 2 firsts, whatever it might be. But in those deals, you kind of need Jaylen McDaniels salary matching. And so in this transaction, the Kings did pick up like a $4.7 million trade exception. So now they've got that to play with as well, which gives them, they have a lot of exceptions to work with now.
Okay.
So they've got trade exceptions from the Vezenkov. I think they got a full $6.5 million trade exception from that. They've got, a small one from the Davion trade, because every NBA trade is not what it looks like. It's not like a straight player for player or one player for 4 players. They're many deals within a giant deal. And so they're a lot more complex when you actually dissect how they're built.
Sure. So where does this leave the Kings roster wise? They had 21 players. They shipped one out.
Yep.
My math, quick math, that means they have 20 now.
Yep.
Don't need a whiteboard for that. Do you expect them to fill that spot, or is this there's 2 days of preseason games left and they'll roll with 20?
Well, no, I do think that there's a possibility that they might sign guys and waive them. So that's a process.
Wait, why?
That's a process where if you're gonna have a G League player, right? So the Kings perfect right here. The Kings just traded for Drew Timme, right? But the Stockton Kings traded right for his G League rights. They traded Jordan Ford and Deontay Burton and a 2025 second round pick for
just
Drew Timme.
Clown show move.
Yeah. For me, I think Drew Timme's a perfect fit to run your G League team, right?
Yes.
He's like a little mini Domantas Sabonis. When you make that move, now Drew Timme is your property in the NBA world. But what you can do as a parent club, you can sign Drew Timme, give him like a $200,000 signing bonus, and then waive him immediately but the signing bonus will come with a little asterisk that says if you spend 60 days in the G League with our G League affiliate, because now you have his rights. You can sign him, waive him, give him a signing bonus for the parent club, and now he won't make the 90 or 100,000 as a G League player. He'll make that and an additional 200 grand to be part of your G League system. Maybe it's 50,000, maybe it's $125,000.
Just basically a solid, giving him some extra cash.
Yeah, you're giving him some extra cash because,
and that doesn't affect your salary cap at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to count, but it's little tiny dollars here and there. So as opposed to being at, 5.9 million under the cap, you might be 5.7 million under the cap type deal.
Okay. So they have to cut 2 players now.
Yeah, they'll cut. I guarantee they'll cut a minimum of 2 players at this point. And they could cut more. I mean, they can start the season with 14. I still think that there's some area that they're trying to figure out, like two-way player versus keeping Boogie Ellis on the main roster or trying to clear one of their two-way spots. So maybe promoting a guy like Mason Jones to the main roster, giving him a standard NBA contract, moving Boogie Ellis from his Exhibit 10 to a two-way contract, and then he's making 500. I think it's 550 for a two-way player.
Yeah.
Maybe it's up to 600,000. It's right around. It's
going to make more money.
Yeah, it's half of a league minimum salary.
Okay.
It's complicated, Kyle. It's complicated.
Sure is. Whatever the Kings do next, I hope it happens during our show. That would be so nice.
I totally agree. I hope that that's what happens. They do something now, and we get to see it and confirm it, and then oh my gosh, this is happening, and we get to talk about it.
That'd be great.